Useful. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the meeting. Some bits of housekeeping. First of all, fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this meeting, and therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building. Fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in War Memorial Park. Could you also note that this meeting is being webcast live, and now that the microphones are working, people will actually be able to hear as well as see the broadcasting of the meeting, and I gather it will now also be seen on YouTube. So on BasingstokeGov, I think is the new YouTube thing. Could I also ask all members, both of the Cabinet and anybody else who has a mobile phone about their person, to make sure that it is on silent. Mine is, because I remember putting it onto that. And it doesn't keep bleeping or doing any other nasty things during the course of the meeting. Fine, then let us move to apologies for absence. There are none. Declarations of interest. Two, Councillor Mrs. Reid.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, declarations of interest on papers 11 and 12, as I'm the council rep on the Proteus board.
Fine, thank you. Councillor John Wardner.
Thank you, Leader. For the avoidance of doubt, I will take no part in decision making on item 10, paper F.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I just actually just go back on the webcasting of the meeting? I can see, but you can't. Apparently the system isn't working properly, and therefore the one where it actually zooms in so that you see the individual person who's speaking is not working. There is just the overall picture, so that will not be happening, which does mean that the guests and the public speakers will have a beautiful picture of the back of their head rather than the front of their head. I gather that it's being worked on, but so far the technical people have not been able to solve the problem. Right, minutes of the last meeting held on the 30th of September. Are there any comments, members, that you wish to make, or are you happy that I sign these later on after the meeting? Good, thank you very much. Petitions, we have none, nor do we have any urgent items, and therefore, as we have a series of speakers tonight on two papers, on paper F, the Lith and Bramley, and paper H, the outcome of COG 1, I propose to take those two and in that order. So beginning with item 10 on the agenda, the Local Infrastructure Fund for Bramley. So if we can ask you to leave the room, and I will, in Councillor Jai Warden's absence, attempt to introduce the paper. The paper is in three parts. There are three separate recommendations, which reflect three bids put forward for infrastructure fund funding. The first one is for the funding to be allocated for the construction of a Bramley railway footbridge. The second one is for a facilities manager as a pump priming activity for Bramley Village Hall. And the third one is for improvements to the entrance of Bramley CAB Primary School. I would, taking those in reverse order, Councillor John Warden hasn't expressed a view on the CAB school. As far as I can tell, neither has the parish council, sorry, the school have noted that Bramley Parish Council have given their support, but we've had no confirmation of that. Support is there, and Councillor Tomlin has confirmed he does not support that proposal, and so the recommendation for that is not to approve it. The proposal for a facilities manager is supported by Councillor Tomlin, is also, at this stage, there is no view from Councillor Jaya-Wardner, and there is no, as far as I can find, indication from the parish council, though I imagine that they probably are in support of it. But the recommendation certainly is to approve that. And then we come to the major amount of money concerned, which is to allocate, or rather ring fence money for the construction of a footbridge in response to the results of the survey of the village plan, and the allocation therefore of a contribution of 450,000 towards the total cost. I understand that the total cost is likely to be in the order of £1 million, but this would enable the leveraging in of the other 550,000 were it to go ahead. Speakers may wish to comment on one or more of those allocations, but can I just make it clear before we start on this one that this is a paper about things which concern Bramley, and I intend that the discussion will remain around things which concern Bramley, and we're not going to open this up to a broader discussion about the local infrastructure fund or how it is working or not working. There are plenty of opportunities for that to be discussed elsewhere. It was discussed at Council last week, and I think it is not appropriate that we should deflect from the specific issues in front of us within this paper. So we shall start, if I may, by asking Councillor Bruce Ansell to come forward. Good evening. You have 2 minutes. The light will start and go yellow when you have 40 seconds left in front of you on the little button there. You need to press the large button in the middle there to turn your light on. If you'd like to do that now, make sure that is working.
Hello? Yep.
No, you're fine. You're on. So you have 2 minutes starting from now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Bruce Ansell representing Bramley Parish. I'm actually here to discuss our proposal that actually was submitted a little bit late, the counter proposal for increased safety, less pollution and reduced congestion. The proposal is not really focused about one sole element. It's focused around a number of what we believe improvements that could be taken through into the village, interlinking disconnected elements of the parish community. We've tried and engaged on a number of elements with Network Rail. We've been discussing with them and they're talking to us. They've supplied us the risk assessment for the level crossing, and we put the proposals to them, and they've said that would help potentially to lower the assessment, which is quite a high level for the level crossing. Local business is in support. We've been talking to the school. Their travel plan, which has been in place since 2001, still does not provide a safe route to school for around about 65% of the population. And that links in with the new recent estate that's been built on German Road. There's about 270 homes there, and the main pathways are not sufficient to cycle down, and pedestrian limits are out straight onto the C32 by the level crossing, so there's no way of crossing the C32. We've used NDP surveys for the community to stress safety and traffic that have come through, and we recently met with the countryside access team to get advice on the proposal. And finally, Sustrans helped us to put the proposal together and the structure of that. And one of the reasons why it was delayed is we were waiting for the feedback from Sustrans. So in 15 seconds, it's a lead into a community engagement plan for sustainable transport for the children to get to school safely. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I should have explained for the record that the way that the process works is bids need to be in by a certain time. This particular bid from the parish council arrived 3 weeks after the deadline. Why, I don't know, because I'm certainly aware that officers have been talking with the parish council since February of last year, and again in July of February of this year and July of this year. Could I just ask you to clarify and we have a supplementary report which has been circulated on the proposal. Of these proposals, how much have actually been costed by the relevant authorities? Now, in other words, presumably largely highways and other people.
Yeah, what I've taken is just indicative costing. So we work with Sustrans on their template of costs. One of the reasons for the delay was the Puffin crossing that we proposed. They actually establish, and I didn't know that there are varying costs for a Puffin crossing across the country. So they were waiting for information back from the Hampshire County Council to put back into the proposal. So really, it's I'm not a transport expert. The costings have been on a template basis, really. So we've taken prices per mile for pathways to introduce a cycleway and put those into the costings for that point there.
So it's a wish list as much as anything, with some basis.
Yeah, some basis. It's a wish list. Yeah.
If we take, for instance, the safe pathway for mechanics car park, that I guess there must be a series of questions over the ownership of land.
There is, yeah. There's no acquisition of land cost in there. At the moment, we put in a search on that land. It came back blank for local county and the business, so we have to presume that Network Rail own that. I've been engaged with Network Rail on their community contact. She is still trying to find out that information at the moment.
Right, and the questions of the 20-mile-an-hour zone and hatching and it's mentioned of cycle rights of way for cycles is something which we need feedback from the county.
Absolutely, yeah. We need experts to look at that and help us with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next on my list, I have Councillor Durrant. Good evening.
Clarify one thing on the application that we put in. We were 3 weeks late. We were told we had an extension, and we did try to make people aware that we were trying to work through that proposal. So it just took time to do. So
fine.
I'm not saying any more on that one. I'll just talk about the footbridge.
Okay, I did speak to the officer concerned, and she certainly wasn't aware there was an extension offered, but not to worry.
Misunderstanding.
We've got
Anyway.
that there.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes.
Right. I've turned it off. I'm here tonight really to confirm the PC's objection to the footbridge proposal. There's a little element of we're not happy with the process, in so much as this money can be ring-fenced, such a large sum of money ring-fenced for a project, which doesn't, from what we have seen, have a great deal of costing activity attached to it. But mainly, the justification for this proposal is question 51 of the parish plan survey, which is, would you like to see a footbridge at Bramley Station? And a good number of people responded yes. To be honest, if I was asked would I like a Bentley, I'd say yes. But if I was asked if I'd like a rusty, broken, three-wheel pink Bentley, I'd say no. And I think that question has led people down a path. We understand that this footbridge is going to be essentially for able-bodied access only. No facility for mothers with pushchairs, crocodiles of kids, scooters, dismounted cyclists or disabled people. And we feel that that's not really acceptable for our community. And our community have been telling us that. Also, the proposal is it's over 8 metres high. It's caged in. The example we've been shown is a grey metallic object. So I don't think if people were given the facts and the question was asked specifically, I don't think there would have been such a great number of people saying yes. And I have personally stood at the crossing and surveyed this, observed it over a number of months, not every day, and not always in the rain. But there aren't large groups of people waiting to cross the railway line. Mostly it's people who get off the North Brown platform, get off the trains there, who want to go east into the more residential part of Bramley. Mostly it's parents with pushchairs and kids and scooters and bikes, and they're not really being catered for in this proposal whatsoever. So I would question that sufficient information has been gathered as to whether this is a valid project for the LIF fund. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right.
Okay.
That's fine. Thank you very much. I don't think there's any questions on that. I think we'll stay within the the list of speakers who are actually local to Bramley, which means Councillor Tomlin next.
Good evening, members.
Don't start until I've paid with this machine. Sorry. For reasons which, to do with the Constitution, you'll notice that you've got 4 minutes rather than the 2 minutes.
I won't gabble, hopefully. Right. You've heard from Bramley Parish Council. We all know that parish councils are, if you like, the first line, and they work strenuously to reflect the feelings of the local community. I personally am unhappy with the footbridge proposal. It's an argument with many sides. The community need hasn't really been demonstrated. The Bramley plan has been referred to. Before I was elected, I was on and indeed set up helping the questionnaire and the analysis of the Bramley plan. There's all these wonderful graphs, but the footbridge, I assure you, was not in the top 6 items commented on. I have the questionnaire here. Yes, people did answer, as you heard, would you like a Rolls Royce? And of course, yes, we would. But it was a general thing that there were more fundamental things on there. They wanted street lighting, footpaths, speed limits, traffic road safety, utilities, bus services, village hall, road maintenance. There were the most original suggestion, could we have a wildflower meadow? But the footbridge was in there, these wonderful word games you play, and this is the most frequently used words, and the footbridge is a tiny word. It was not brought up very much, but there was a specific question. We've heard that the original scheme that we've been shown that Hampshire County Council worked up doesn't have this accessibility provision, so it will only if you like, help those that can climb steps. The ramp solution is possible, but will be further up the line, would take up a lot of land, and is seen, well, by the county as unworkable, and it would look a terrible edifice. So the Bramley solution is more related to traffic management and safety around this level crossing. The level crossing is going to be with us for many years, well, forever really. When the gates open, people do go across, traffic moves, it needs some sorting out. The footbridge itself, I see the main benefit is really to the Network Rail customers. The ticket machine is on one side of the platform. You have to go across there to get your ticket, otherwise you'll be fined, and then you come back and you find the gates have shut, so people can't get across the track. So the real beneficiaries will be the Network Rail users. So I really see that it's a Network Rail problem. I think you've heard they've identified there is a safety, or fairly high safety hazard risk with this bridge, with this crossing rather. And so I don't actually see that the LLF funds should be spent on this type of thing where it's there's a better benefit in the wings. Network Rail itself will benefit by a cash injection. I think they should be the ones delivering the solution with a bridge and dealing with the community about whether it's actually required. And I was sold the LIF system, the funding, as being something that came out of community needs, led and championed by the community, with, yes, the support of ward members or not. But I do see this one, I'm afraid, as a ward member initiative going on their own. And that's what concerns me, that we need to consider what is best for Bramley, what is best for the residents. And I think the evidence ahead of us says, I think we need some time out. We need to sort this out. We don't want any knee-jerk reactions, and we don't want to commit this money forever, and therefore suffer the consequences. So I hope you will consider that favourably. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being on time. Thanks indeed. And next speaker I have, make sure I get this in the right order, Councillor Harvey. Good evening. You,
Good evening, Leader.
Also have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Again, I'm speaking in support of the speakers this evening, and specifically about the footbridge element of the decision in front of you, and in particular regarding the process that's been gone through to reach the actual decision that's in front of you. the precedent that that sets in regard to the LIF and how the LIF is used to achieve such a decision, the limited information in detail on that particular element of the decision has already been highlighted, particularly compared to the expectations that are being placed on other applications within the LIF, and how other applications are being strenuously and pushed towards far more detail and far more justification, and in fact are being turned down even with such detail. So that raises a question mark over the decision-making process itself. I think it also raises a question mark over the transparency, the notion of a level playing field, or the consistency of decision-making across the application of the LIF funding. And the decision and discussion around ring fencing is a particular point to bring out, particularly also the upfront funding that was previously talked about in the report, funding from future years. All of that raises issues of precedent, it raises issues of expectation on how the LIF will be applied to other applications in the future if this decision is followed through as it currently stands. The decision feels like it's been written on the back of a fag packet, in all honesty. It doesn't feel as coherent as a lot of others that are coming forward. So in proposing it and in pushing it forward, there will be an expectation from here on in that the portfolio holder will approach other LIF applications in exactly the same way as this one is. We will accept and expect exactly the same tests because they are not consistent at the moment across the way this funding is being applied. And in terms of the two, both the parish council and the ward members, I think in relation to their involvement and how this is took forward, I think we should listen to them very, very closely. At the end of the day, the parish council reflects the community, as do the ward members. You've heard one ward member, and I think in relation to where this decision goes, it's very important, as I say, for the precedent it will set for every other LIF application that comes forward.
Thank you very much. Next speaker has completely disappeared, but I think it was Councillor Potter. Yeah. Good evening.
Hello, Leader. Good evening, sir. All right. I mean, supplementing, if I may, the comments that have just been made by Councillor Harvey, and I mean, I don't appear before you very often. I know you'll be relieved by that, but I thought I'd go through the ritual of making representations, and the Cabinet will ignore them as usual and confirm the decision it's already come to. But I hope tonight that won't be the case, because I genuinely think you should take note of what the Parish Council and one of the elected local members has said on this. I mean, I believe, and I'm talking only about the footbridge, that this is ill-conceived and, quite frankly, inappropriate. And as the Parish Council itself has said, and I quote really from a note that I saw from Councillor Phil McCurry, where he talks in terms of this leaves us being able to solve the problem for a few people, but not for the majority, and with a very large bill. I mean, the prospect of this footbridge, which will serve only a few able-bodied people, I think is quite outrageous, really. I go a step further in saying, and I was looking at some of the stuff that originates from Network Rail today, who are very proud to say that they have the exclusive responsibility, and so they should, for the rail infrastructure. I mean, it's an interesting organisation, Network Rail, in terms of the way it might be described, and it was only in September that they were actually converted to what they describe as a central government body, actually increasing the public sector debt by £34 billion in that connection. And they now apparently have a borrowing facility of 30 billion, which is fascinating really, because that's on the assets that were converted and given to them. But their revenue in 2013 was £6.2 billion. This is an organisation that should, and in this case I think has to, take responsibility for the provision of this footbridge. It should not be supplemented by LIF money. That's entirely inappropriate. And I think that the Parish Council has made it very clear, and Councillor Tomlin's just endorsed it, I think, really, that the problems around that area are much more complex and can be solved purely by the provision of the footbridge. It needs a comprehensive analysis of the problems that occur in terms of road, traffic congestion and the pedestrian problems that occur around there. And that needs to be re-looked at. I hope on this occasion that the Cabinet will give some thought to the representations we're making and say that this decision as it stands is inappropriate and should not be supported this evening. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. And then I think the last speaker on this, Councillor is Laura James. You have 4 minutes. Good evening.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought I saw those lights there. If we... Oh gosh, okay. If we presented this bid before you, you would be horrified to think that the community of our wards didn't support this and another existing councillor didn't support this bid. I don't think that we'd actually bring something forward, and I think it sets a precedent in relation to any future bids that come forward where there are 2 or 3 councillors within the wards. And did we expect just one councillor in relation to the criteria? I don't think we did. I think we expected there to be a general feeling of support. I'm amazed that it's come forward at this stage. I'm horrified to think of that, really. The local infrastructure money was meant to be a community-led initiative, and that's how it was sold to us. The bid before us tonight doesn't meet the criteria, clearly doesn't meet the criteria. If this funding for the bridge was to go ahead, I think there's strategic funding for the new homes bonus, which is 40% of new homes bonus funding, could look at that if that's what they wanted to do and that's what a political direction you wanted to take it in. But this isn't what this funding is for. And I think there's been some sort of discussion tonight with the parish council that they missed the deadline for the bid. They may have missed the deadline, but there's no end for that. That money's not going anywhere unless a cabinet member comes along and grabs it and it's taken away. I mean, that money is there and it's for them to use. We have money, we have pots of money within our own wards, and it's there for us to use as councillors. There's no time limit on that. The only concern I do have is if in the election there's a change of government, what happens if that money is ring fenced? Who then funds it if it isn't there? What happens to that money? I also want to understand where's the money come from if it's ring fenced and it's for future funding. It's come from a pot that doesn't belong to Bramley, and if it's ring fenced, what happens to who loses out in the future? Who's going to self-fund? Who's going to fund that? Is it going to come from Popley? Is it going to come from Malden? I don't quite understand in relation to what you mean by that. I'm very concerned about actually ring fencing a decision like this, and I think, as it's been said by Councillor Harvey, it sets a precedent, and I don't think we should be doing that. But I think that what worries me more, that there's been this discussion with the parish that they have to get their decision in. They have to hurry to do that. This bid from the parish came in on Friday. They should have had time to meet with officers, work it up, look at it, and support them to turn it into a proposal. That's what we've all done. And it would be quite dishonest to say you have to get it in by this time. The only reason they have to get it in is if we have a councillor, Councillor Gerardina, who's actually wanting to take the money and there won't be any left for them. Of course, then there's a hurry to do it. But if they didn't, and if he was working with his community, then they would have time to work it up. I'm very concerned how this is presented. I think it leaves the administration very vulnerable, and I think this decision making is very poor. And this doesn't meet the criteria for the lift. It doesn't meet the criteria that we're all working to. And I ask you please to defer this decision while you look at this and work with the community of Bramley on what they want and how they want to spend their money. But I understand that you can use monies from other areas, but to ring fence it, I'm not sure that was in the criteria that you could actually do that. But and then again, to then use money that isn't there and to borrow against, I feel that the cabinet member who has responsibility for this and is using this is abusing the system.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right, that concludes the speakers. Well, I propose that we do I'm assuming that since nobody has spoken on the other two parts of the decision notice, namely that the allocation of £50,000 for the Village Hall Trust, or that no lift funding is allocated to Bramley Church of England Primary School entrance project, that we will agree, subject to your views, those two elements of it. Yep, agreed. So those two will go through as per the published decision notice. We then come down to what seems to be the railway bridge versus traffic safety considerations. And I think the key thing is in this is, whilst I hear some of the words that are used about people using or abusing their circumstances, the most important people to me are the residents of Bramley, and that we should arrive at the best solution for the residents of Bramley, and therefore we should keep that uppermost in our mind, and actually having if warring factions within the what one might loosely term the political factions in Bramley is not helpful to getting the best results for them at the end of the day. So we find ourselves having to try and find a way through this as to what would be the best result for the residents of Bramley. Actually, what we have here is not a firm proposal as I see it for either of the two proposals. One is a proposal to ring fence money whilst a feasibility study is carried out, and the other one is a proposal which very honestly is said is work in progress. It is development work for a series of options which haven't actually been checked either for feasibility or for their relevance with the appropriate well, it will largely be HCC, I think, will be the specialist in that particular area. So how we actually balance the two, or if we even should be balancing the two, is a difficult decision. Members, do you have points you wish to make? Yeah, Councillor Rathel. So.
Well, I think the starting point is that ideally we'd probably like to do both. And the current point in time, we can't do both. Perhaps we can't do either, we don't know yet. But certainly what the Bramley Parish Council is suggesting may well be good things that can be done as and when they're worked up, as and when the funding becomes available, as it may well become available, because it'll be smaller amounts of money for some of those things. The starting point is, as far as the crossing is concerned, I think Councillor Tomlin said some things which are self-evident and must be therefore correct. The level crossing is staying, and a ramped footbridge isn't going to happen in that location. And Network Rail does bear some of the responsibility for funding it. He talked about people using the crossing to get their tickets. It may well be those very same people are Bramley residents. And I think where we are is, this is probably the first major opportunity, certainly the first one I've noted of being, or can recall of being on this council for 12.5 years, of us having an opportunity to provide a footbridge for Bramley. And it might be the only opportunity that comes around for the next dozen years. And it could be the situation where people who don't get themselves elected to politics or don't necessarily participate in the things that we do will turn around and say, God, they're bonkers. Did they really miss this opportunity where Network Rail was stumping up the majority of the money, and to spend it on things which they could have spent it on for other money on in due course? And that's my starting point for thinking of this, that it would be a missed opportunity, and it's desperately needed, and I would support the recommendation that we take it to the next stage.
Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Leader. I take the point you made that this is really about the interests of the residents of Bramley, and I suppose that having had experience of myself of putting forward applications for lift funding, I really am very disappointed that it's taken this long and still there is no common ground between the ward councillors and the parish council. It's a very disappointing state of affairs for the people of Bramley, and it's really therefore being placed upon us to make a decision in this. I think Councillor Raffel's point about this being an opportunity that could be missed, and that there is potential funding here from Network Rail, and what we're talking about here is a feasibility study. I think that the parish council did have an opportunity, has had many months to come forward with proposals. That's what happens in my ward, and what we have is something that's been delivered late, and is clearly there's a great deal of due diligence that needs to be done, including even identifying who are the owners of bits of land. So I'm not impressed by the proposals that have come through from the parish council on this. But I remain disappointed that the two ward councillors between them can't work together and come up with something that is in the interests of Bramley residents. And I can see that a footbridge can be something. It is something that's needed, not least on safety issues. And so I would. I do acknowledge that the deficiency of a footbridge that doesn't cater for the disabled, and I would ask as part of the feasibility study whether there was any way of overcoming that problem. But like Councillor Raffel, I think that if we don't do something on this, then more time will go by. It doesn't seem it's possible that the local community can get together to actually come forward with a consensus on this, and therefore, unhappily, I think we have to support it. As I say, it's not a very happy state of affairs.
Thank you. Could I just ask the members in the audience if they wouldn't mind not carrying on their own separate conversations whilst we're having a debate? It is normal practice for people to remain silent while debate is taking place. Thank you. Please do.
I've heard obviously what Councillor Isaac said. I'm not going to be critical of the parish council and their timing. There may be reasons that we're unaware of, and it may be that what they genuinely feel is necessary. It may be that they've just got problems of getting it all down on paper in the timescale. That in itself doesn't mean that what they're suggesting is without merit. It may well be with merit, and it may well be that all of those things over a period of the next few years may all be achieved. And I'd like, if they turn out to be with merit and the funding it can be found, I'd like to see them achieved for them. But I just think this needs to be approached not in this is an either or decision. It's a both and decision, where at the current moment we're being asked to look at one opportunity, and we're not being able to say that opportunity excludes the other. We're being asked to look at one opportunity at the given current moment in time. And when those other matters come forth, some of which perhaps ought to get funding from Hampshire County Council, then maybe that we can progress them in due course too. So I wouldn't want it thought that I was being critical of the parish council for whatever reasons they have for these matters coming in the way they did.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Just.
Thank you, Leader. Just very briefly, I'd like to echo what Councillor Isaac said and also what Councillor Raffel said, and I will be supporting this recommendation. I think it would be a shame. It's a missed opportunity that we can't, that we shouldn't pass by. Network Rail are putting up quite a bit of the funds, and it is improving the infrastructure in Bramley, which can then improve not just the safety for the residents, but also the traffic in the area. And I think it would be unfortunate if we miss this opportunity, and I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Mrs. Reid.
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to support this as well for the reasons already listed by colleagues. It is a shame that we don't have community cohesion on this and that the community don't entirely agree with the proposal putting forward, but that isn't necessarily a reason for not doing it, because it is an opportunity. Network Rail are putting forward potentially over £500,000, and it would be a shame not to do this. And as Councillor Raffel says, there is still the opportunity to come forward at a future date, perhaps when the parish councils worked up their ideas and worked in a little harder and that, and come forward with something a little bit more concrete. There is still that opportunity, so it isn't either or. It would be a shame to turn this down. And I agree with some of the speakers also from the floor who said that we should listen to the residents. We should certainly, but if you go back to the survey, a response of 600 local people is quite a good response, and of that 75% said yes, they would like to see a footbridge at Bramley Station, which seems to me a fairly straightforward question with a fairly straightforward answer. So I support this.
Might as well complete the set, Councillor Ossleton.
I'm just saying, yes, well, I'm going to support this as well. But when you do the feasibility study, I agree with the parish council. I think you need to look at to talk to the residents and probably the school, if it's for safety reasons, if you can't get buggies up there, and the disabled as well.
Please do.
I just wanted to clarify the whole point about improving traffic, because I'm hoping that people would be more likely to walk to school to collect their children then than as opposed to driving, because the traffic in that area when the schools are there is quite bad because people don't want to be crossing. I think it would be much better.
Right. I have a, I think, slightly different view, but probably maybe it is the same. Is that there clearly is a problem that revolves around the station. I've actually spent some time sitting, watching people getting off the train, whilst consuming a very nice cake from the bakery which sits next door, but also wandering down the footpath that goes alongside it and looking at the various other aspects of the way people were moving around in Bramley. Though whilst it was not an exhaustive survey, it gave me some feel of what the problem is. There is a very clear, as Councillor Mrs. Reid said, I mean, there's a very clear steer here that 75% of people who were questioned said they would like a footbridge. Clearly, they don't know what sort of footbridge it will be, but then none of us know what sort of footbridge it will be because the work has not been done yet to determine what kind of a footbridge is feasible or not. I think there is equally considerable merit in the list of things which has been put forward by the parish council that need to be studied. What we don't know, of course, is how much of the work which particularly revolves around the crossing, which is really does cut Bramley in half at considerable parts of the day when trains are going both ways. How much of the road safety issues can be dealt with as part of the scope of the bridge itself? And that kind of discussion needs to take place between Hampshire and Network Rail, as well as the local community. I think it is very clear that the indications have been that both Hampshire and Network Rail think a footbridge would be useful, particularly to the extent that Network Rail are saying that they are prepared to invest their money in it. Therefore, that is a positive sign. But I would not want the village, the parish his recommendations for some of these safety measures to be lost. I think let's just be clear about the money. This is not the totality of money which is available to Bramley. And just to clear it up, this is not money which is coming from anywhere else, from any other ward or anything else like that. This is money which is within the fund allocated to Bramley and Bramley alone. And therefore, I think is a bit of a red herring. I am concerned that if we don't make a decision, nothing will happen and nothing will continue to happen for a prolonged period of time, and that by virtue of nothing happening, the residents of Bramley could be without a footbridge if that is what is a feasible option and is the right thing to do, would never happen. I think we need at least to move forward by ring fencing the money for a year to see what can be done in terms of the design of a footbridge, which is what Network Rail have said that they are prepared to undertake. At the same time, I believe that we ought to move forward with looking at the projects which the parish council is putting forward to see how many of those aspects of it, A, are feasible, B, are desirable, to the extent that they might or might not be effective, and could also be funded out of the total funding that is available. And there's even by ring fencing this money and allocating the money for the village hall, there is still money available of over £100,000 for Bramley to use within its community. That's before leveraging in any other money from road safety pockets that Hampshire may have, or even the parish using its own funds, if that were to be thought appropriate. So what I would like to propose is that we do ring fence this money for a period of a year, of a figure of 450,000, which is made up of, as outlined, of 354,700 currently available from LIFT funding, and 95,300 for anticipated future new homes bonus, for 12 months for the footbridge project whilst a feasibility study is carried out. But at the same time, that the safety proposals put forward by Bramley are to be worked up in cooperation with Network Rail and Hampshire to establish, first of all, their viability, but also how much can be incorporated into the footbridge project, how much needs to be allocated from the remaining 128,000 of LIFT funding available, or what other funding might be available to implement them. So that is my proposal for a reworded decision notice, and if that is, I think, summarises reasonably the views of, that's what we will do. Is that agreed? Agreed. Good, thank you. And thank you to the speakers for that. We now then move on to the second item, which has speakers on it, which is the commissioning outcome group. This is paper H, if you would like to go to paper H, for which Councillor Mrs. Reid disappears and Councillor Jywardner comes back in. You can ask a point of information, but it is not normal process. But
it is. I'm obviously pleased to know that Councillor Mrs. Reid has declared her interest in this next item because of her membership of the Protest Theatre Company. I mean, I understand Councillor Mrs. Ostleton is a member of the Festival Management Board, which is a subgroup, I think, of Destination Basingstoke, isn't it? I mean, does not the same restriction apply to Councillor Ostleton?
I think two things. One is
the chief executive on that one, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, Councillor Mrs. Reid does not have to withdraw. She has been advised that there is no need for her to do so. She has chosen to do so, which is a separate issue. Well, she's perfectly entitled to make her own choices. I believe some. Do you need to declare an interest?
Well, I declare an interest because I sit on the board of the festival. Thank you.
Well, I hope that clarifies that point. Right. If we come to this paper then, which I shall ask Councillor Isaac to introduce. Again, I would just like to point out that this is a paper around the outcomes and the comments upon those outcomes made by CEP on the 28th of October, and the recommendations that stem from that. Again, I do not wish to enter into any discussions about whether or not commissioning is an appropriate way to deal with these matters, or whether commissioning is working well or not working well. That is a subject for other debate at another time in another committee, but not for this evening. So I hope that we can all try and keep our remarks relevant to the subjects of this specific paper. And the first speaker that I have on this is Councillor Harvey again. Sorry, before you speak, before we all get carried away, it would be quite a good idea to introduce the paper, I suppose. Councillor Isaac, would you like to do so?
Very true. Thank you, Leader. This report covers the recommendations for delivering future outcomes for arts and culture, and relates to the grants round for arts and culture that is due from the spring of next year. We've approached this grants round through commissioning, through a commissioning process, not in the previous method of essentially relying on the advice of officers from various departments. We now have a dedicated commissioning team who have undertaken a 6-month process earlier in this year of consultation with and involvement with local groups involved in the arts and culture community in the borough. This report addresses the key recommendations covering strategic grant funding as against individual programme funding, and these constitute the bulk of the £2.3 million or thereabouts that the council spends of residents' money on arts and culture. Just to highlight some of the key themes, there's a recognition of the excellent arts and culture offering we have in the borough, and the commissioning process has been about challenging that community to help generate new and creative thinking about how we take forward arts and culture insofar as it is supported by the borough with residents' money. One of the key thrusts of the new approach is to provide greater longevity and stability of funding where that's merited. A theme that I mentioned at the introduction of the COGS was the need to make public money invested work harder, and we've been seeking collaboration and ideas from our arts and culture partners to drive cost savings as part of this process, look for more efficiencies and signpost them towards securing additional sources of revenue beyond the council. On Basingstoke Live specifically, the value that is attached to this event in the life of Basingstoke is acknowledged, and the important role that it plays in encouraging local talent. It's clear what it represents, its values, and that these values are held dear by many. My proposals are designed to allow it to grow and to flourish. At this stage, it is soft market testing only that is being proposed. It's not a decision. We need to see if there's a suitable and viable market out there before we take any further decisions. Again, I'd like to thank all those who participated so creatively and constructively in the COG process. And I would also like to acknowledge the recommendations and the endorsement from the CEP committee. I've reflected on their recommendations, and those feature in the revised decision notice that I'm proposing tonight.
Thank you very much. And just for the record again, so we have now a revised decision notice in front of us for this. Which would you like just to highlight the revised parts of it for the benefit of anybody watching at home?
Right, indeed. The revised decision notice firstly undertakes that soft market testing exercise around the delivery of the portfolio of local events should be undertaken, and that outcome of that should be reported back to Community, Environment and Partnerships Committee before any further decision is taken. That in relation to, let's see what else we've got here. In relation to, over the page, the Proteus Theatre Company, that we acknowledge the case that's been made for a single strategic fund to cover both the creation space and the touring theatre company, and therefore we are encouraging Proteus to make a further application for additional grant funding for their touring theatre so that it can be form part of an overall single grant award.
And it is reasonable to say that the rather convoluted prose which refers to the Proteus Theatre Company has been discussed with them so that they understand it, even if we may struggle.
That's my belief, Leader, yes.
In terms of the Proteus Theatre Company, just to be absolutely clear, Councillor Isaac, is it the case that it's the 65,000 that you're anticipating them getting in the context of the language you're using, as they stated at CEP, as an ongoing grant? Admittedly, you're talking about this 5% as others have, but nonetheless, the 65 was what they required year on year to maintain their existing function. The 35 was the fund specifically for the creation space as is.
That's correct, Councillor Harvey. I'm expecting them to, I mean, we're inviting them, we're expecting them to make a strategic grant application for the 65,000 or thereabouts for a period of years. Obviously, the detail of what that grant allocation would be over that 5 years is yet to be decided, but the principle is acknowledged.
Okay, in that case, if there's no more clarification needed, 4 minutes, we'll begin now.
No, thank you. It is interesting talking about individual organisations and the way that they feel about this whole process, really, and having had many conversations with many different organisations, and the way they feel strongly about the relationship between the debates they had in the COG meetings, the questionable conclusions that were reached as a result of those conversations, and those post-it notes, those famous post-it notes that were placed on the Lords, and those post-it notes being translated into conclusions, and then the final leap into recommendations. Not a reference back at the point of recommendations to the COG, but a report that came to CEP with what many considered limited financial appraisals and limited risk assessments based upon the kind of decision-making that was being proposed. I think the organisations feel, at least those I've spoken to, were suggesting, they were invited to do one thing and the end result was something quite different. And the conclusions were something quite different. And some of them feel, and they commented on this at the CEP, they commented to this at previous meetings, at scrutiny meeting, where they felt that the process they felt was fixed and determined. There was an end point that you were always going to get to. And surprise, surprise, you've got to it. Quite assuredly, you've got to it. Particularly around competitive tendering and around what we always feared your take on commissioning was. And I think you talk about change and you spoke about change at the previous meeting, and I don't think you generally understand the consequences of change in the manner in which you describe it. Nobody fears change. I've had plenty of emails from people from Basingstoke Live saying we don't fear change. What they fear is the destruction of something that works, is successful, and that can evolve in the way they talk about it, not in the way you are talking about it. Very different. I also want to challenge what was said previously around the need for more professional input. Well, our officers are professional, and I found that very difficult to hear from certain members, that we required more professional input and more commercial acumen, because those officers are professional, exceptionally professional, and they should be congratulated for delivering Basingstoke Live in conjunction with the community to be as successful as it is. So really the question begs us about this commissioning process and how you've reached these decisions, and how the process has gone through, and how people are concerned about it. Now, having the discussions a long while ago with the original intentions of commissioning from the previous cabinet member and the former chair of ARGA as to what it was originally you were pushing for, to where it's got to now, is totally different. And when you ask people to buy into this decision and buy into the process, it's got to reflect in your conclusions, and it just does not. So I feel very strongly that the soft market testing has got to be independent, and it has assuredly got to be something that has got confidence, because at the moment it's going to be an exercise that takes you to the conclusion you want to reach. And in terms of the emails that have been flying around on Basingstoke Live, I think the decision process, as you've indicated, that you may reach competitive tendering without going back to CEP or going back to any other conclusion of consultation, if you go down that road, I think you're playing with fire. And I think we are risking something incredibly important and special to this town. And I don't believe you understand the consequences of your actions in that context. So this decision, I don't believe, is being made in the interests of the arts and culture sector in Basingstoke as a whole. I really don't believe that. I think it's ill-informed, and I think the recommendations are exactly where you would expect them to be for what you believe commissioning to be and what you see as the future of public funding and public involvement in our economy, in our arts and culture sector for the future. And I'm bitterly disappointed in that. And I don't think it reflects where you started. I think it reflects the dogmatic position that you've taken as an administration.
Sorry, I'll say that again. Thank you very much. Next speaker, we have a long list of speakers on this subject, is Councillor Potter.
Thank you again, Leader. Can I just put it on record? I mean, I didn't say it before, I'll say it now. I mean, presumably Councillor Ekus, who's a board member of Destination Basingstoke, takes the same position. Are you not? That's wrong, I'll correct that. Okay. You have no connection with Destination Basingstoke. Okay. My apologies there.
Well, if you took my firm runs the Phillips half marathon, but that's nothing to do. I don't have anything to do with Destination Basingstoke. And
I withdraw what I said. Thank you. Moving on to the points I want to make, and I'll try and just confine myself to process. I mean, obviously my views about the COG group and the way that was organised and the outcomes are well known, I think, really. What I'm genuinely concerned about, I think, is the interpretation, as Councillor Isaac describes it, within the supplementary briefing note to Cabinet and the decision notice before you. In regard to, as I understood it, the CEP meeting, the very clear resolution that I have in front of me in regard to soft market testing was that the outcome of that would be reported back, should be reported back to that committee. That's the resolution. And what I just want to be clear about is the sequence of that. If that resolution is right, how that fits in with regard to the first bullet point of the decision notice that's before you tonight, because that seems to undertake to go through the process of competitive tender without referral back to that CEP. I mean, again, Councillor Isaac will correct me if I'm wrong on that. Obviously, no reference back to COG, and as I say, no apparent reference back to the committee itself. The other thing I just want to check as well, if I may, is that the commitment obviously to undertake soft market testing of the Anvil and the Haymarket, and I'm interested in that, fascinated by that, for organisations that we neither own nor manage, how soft market testing controlled by the council is organised in that regard. As I say, organisations that we don't own or manage. The final point that I want to make tonight really is in regard to, as Councillor Harvey has described, the staff, our professional staff within the events and festivals section. I mean, I said this at CEP, and the report we had before us then said the same thing, that the as is, in other words, the status quo in regard to the way that section operates was not an acceptable option to be considered, which I found very surprising and unacceptable. But certainly, had those staff been given the option of delivering, for example, a 5% reduction in the cost directly attributable to the work that they do for the council, I think they would have responded positively to that. Now, as I understand it, they have not been given that opportunity. They have not been supported in the way that they would need support to do that. And it seems to me that is, as I indicated in the CP, unforgivable really in the context of what you're seeking to do. Any organisation that has a product that it delivers currently, which I think by any appraisal is working well, would nevertheless give the people who work within that section the opportunity of how they would want to indicate they could improve that further. So I think when it comes to market testing, that facility should exist, should be provided for in-house provision, and I'm not aware that that's been provided in any of the options before you. Thank you, Leader.
Wrong button. Thank you very much. I'll leave Councillor Isaac to respond to all points at the end, I think. So the next speaker is Councillor Bierman. Councillor Bierman, there you are. Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Leader, and others, colleagues,
Right.
one and all.
4 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Let me just go in just on a sort of a couple of bureaucratic things. I'm sorry to persist with this complaint about the fact that in our sort of mission statement, it uses the word facilities as a plural when it really means a possessive facilities. And since it's, as I say, there's lots of grammatical things that disturb me in the document, but that one I think ought to be put right because it's so fundamental. I'm also disturbed on the bureaucratic side of things that it says in paragraph 10.1 that these the outcome of the CEP meetings being sent to cabinet members. Why only the cabinet members? I, as a CEP member, have a very great interest in what the cabinet deems to have happened at the CEP, and I would have liked to have seen this paper before I came tonight. The same with the decision notice. Thanks to the help of a member.
Sorry, I would hate to stop you in mid-session, so I'll and then you start again. I entirely agree with you. And I have made this point that these papers should be made. They are actually available on the website. As soon as they are published for anybody. So they are there, but I do think that we should make it a general rule that all supplementary reports on whatever paper, when they come through, should be circulated by email. And I think the Chief Executive would agree with me that that's the right way to go forward, and we'll make sure that happens in the future. I will press the button and hopefully you'll carry on from where you left off. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, I hope you'll allow me a couple of extra seconds just to say something further on that, because that's something that's not of my doing. I mean, I'm grateful for that, and I wouldn't say that I've made the change because you're obviously intending to do it. So thank you for that. But I mean, that same thing applies, because I think there's bits of, I was going to say something kind about the Conservative team. I was helped to find out what the latest decision notice is, which seems to in fact cover one of the problems that Councillor Potter mentioned, namely the question of whether what was discussed in terms of Basingstoke Live and how the commissioning went forward was going to be just a decision and go on, or whether it was going to come back to CEP. Though it seems a bit grudging, and though it seems to me, still having tried to read it whilst I'm trying to listen to the debate, which I don't do very well, it does seem to me that the final decision notice, if it is the final one I've seen, does imply that there will at least be an opportunity for CEP to discuss it further. So I say I hope I'm not going to lose too much time because of that, because that, as I say, is something I shouldn't have had to mention anyway. There are three things that, having been very much involved with the CEP meeting, that I believe were sort of issues that were going around. The first was the Proteus, and that was put forward as a clerical and administrative error, and that has seemingly been put right, and that's good, and that was recognised at that meeting and put right. The next issue was Basingstoke Live and the events. Now, till I saw this latest notice, I didn't think that had been dealt with properly. I think that the emphasis, even in this decision notice, is much more supportive and promotional towards competitive tendering, and it looks to me as though the in-house team is an also ran. And I find it quite unfortunate that the report that was produced by the events team was not up before CEP to consider, because when I read that after the meeting, when I became aware of it, I thought that was a massively constructive report, which had a lot of good ideas in it, and I think it was a shame that that wasn't in front of the CEP to consider. And because they weren't able to consider it, they weren't able to endorse it. But I think had I had it on the evening, I would have jolly well endorsed it. A third thing that came out of the meeting that was totally unexpected was, in fact, I think it was Councillor Diane Taylor that said it. It could have been Sushmita Parley, but there's a reference to the fact that if one has something that's special and unique within a region on the arts scene, that's something really good to build up an arts basis for. And bearing in mind the type of dance that Carla the Arts promotes, where it is something really exceptional and there's not many people nationally that understand it and so on and that promote it and teach it. The fact that she is able to and is keen to do it is something that we should recognise and have as a USP in going forward and say, here, let's build on this, we've got something special. And I'll just conclude in just saying something. I'm generally disappointed that this is all being pushed through and that the engagement with members is, to my mind, minimal and almost superficial. In closing, I will say one positive thing that is in the report, I think is really a good idea under the new initiatives heading, and that is the idea that we have some sort of facility for sharing equipment. I do know that that is something that is a big problem, that these smaller groups can't buy all the kit, but if there were a sort of central location where they could borrow it from, and so therefore extend the use and usefulness of such equipment, that would be really good if that is done. So, you know, I commend that part of the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bierman. Next, I have Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair.
4 minutes, as usual.
I want to pick up on one of the points within the decision notice around the revenue grant funding to Hampshire museums. If you look at the funding cuts that are just taking place or recommendations from county regarding transport, it really worries me, and I know members of the Labour group did raise this, and you did echo your concerns, councillors, in relation to this, but they're going to receive revenue grant funding of, and it says within the report what it's going to be. But really, you know, and we've always said this as a Labour group, we do need to look at our relationship and what we're funding, which is a county function, and museums is a county function, when we are losing core funding from some incredibly valuable services that we need to now pick up. If we don't, vulnerable people will be without transport. I also want to pick up the issue, and I don't think it raises it within the reports, or never did, is about the charity events, the Mayor's Firework Festival. I think it's also about, and it was raised by Councillor East, about the half marathon and the amount of money that people are raising there and how vulnerable they would be. I was concerned about the soft market testing and what it actually meant and what it does mean. I'm pleased to see that it's coming back to the overview. I think it should come back. In what form that comes back, I'd be interested to see. You talked about this being creative thinking. This was never creative as a process. And those arts and culture members who took part in the COG say so. I mean, we could have been, and it could have been really creative, as Councillor Bierman said. The members of our own staff team wanted to be creative, but were stopped for being so. And I've seen the same report, which is very interesting reading, and I urge you all to look at that. We haven't enabled us to think about what we could do differently and how we could do it. I think if you look at the ANVIL, I mean, I'm pleased that the chair of the ANVIL has offered up 5% saving, but you have to remember also that the ANVIL was getting and does get over half of all the arts funding. It's an enormous amount of funding that they receive, and a grant they've received from this borough. So you have to put it in context. There are very many groups within this paper that are going to be very vulnerable. At the weekend, I met with some parents of a group, a young group that played at the Basingstoke Live, and they were really proud, and they said it gave them an opportunity that these young people would never have had. They had their debut album as a result of that, and are doing really well and saving some money, and the money they make from selling their CDs, they're going to actually produce some plastic covers next time, because they could only put it into some paper covers this time. And it was an opportunity for them, and they feel really excited about that opportunity. I don't know that this soft market testing is going to give them this opportunity. And what concerns me is we made reference within the overview that it was 80% of all bands that play within Basingstoke Live are local. They're very small young people and small numbers of people, and I would hope that the marking testing ensures that that is the percentage of people that continue to have the opportunity to show us what they do and make it a great place for young people in this town. And I just urge you really to please think again. We have some amazing staff. We had a festival that was second to none. And as I said at the overview, my son was so impressed when he
If you
Googled.
could just draw to a
I
conclusion.
am going to, yeah. When he Googled that the fact that this is the only free festival of this size in the whole of the country. And I think that's something to be really proud of. And why are we looking to outsource it? And why are we looking to make money out of it and change it for those young people? And I urge you to please think again.
Thank you. Then we have Councillor Tilbury. Good evening, Councillor Tilbury.
Evening to you all. Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, so unfortunately I haven't had time to look through I have a quick look at the change decision notice, which seems very similar with slightly more flowery wording, I think. But I mean, having attended the CEP committee meeting where this was first discussed, what I found disturbing was the complete absence of accurate facts to support the recommendations. In fact, many of the numbers were changed on the night. So we all know what a superb event Basingstoke Live and the festival has become, which is entirely down to the hard work of our staff and the army of volunteers who got these events up and running in the first place. Yet now we are saying that if a commercial operator can run it, we will hand it over to them. Doesn't matter whether they're any good or not. While it's clear that the COG did look at other in-house alternatives that could reduce costs, these got no mention in this report. I've now seen the paper produced by our own events team that makes a credible case for enhancing our own in-house capabilities. It also outlines the benefits to the wider borough of operating these events in-house. So the first question is, why was this option not considered? As for the Anvil and the Haymarket, back in 2006 we were told the Haymarket was insolvent when it wasn't, and the only way forward was to amalgamate management of both in the hands of the Anvil Trust. Back in 2006 the combined income of the Anvil and the Haymarket was around £5.3 million, and combined attendances were 235,000 people a year. 8 years later, income is lower at £5.1 million and attendances are down to 158,000, some 77,000 less. Yet no mention is made of this in this report, of this staggering fall in income and attendances. Surely the first thing we need to do is find out what is actually going on. I don't know what the problems are, and this report doesn't tell me. I would like to know from the Anvil Trust what they believe is at the root of these worrying figures. So the second question is, were members of this administration aware of the scale of the fall in income and attendances? And if they were, why were we not told about it? I remember this going to scrutiny some years ago, but that was quite a long time ago, and things have not improved since then. We are now proposing that we carry out soft market testing to see if we can outsource management to another provider. But without understanding what is actually going on with the existing ones, how will that help? I personally don't have a problem with soft market testing either of these proposals, as this should have been done already so that we would at least have the ability to make decisions based on valid comparisons, not just assume the solution is outsourcing. What is just as disturbing is that having presented us with comparisons with other concert halls in Appendix E, no one appears to have noticed that the venue with the lowest level of subsidy is the Ipswich Regent and Corn Exchange, which not only has the lowest level of subsidy, but is also the only one that is actually operated by the council's own staff. This looks like a case of we've made up our minds, don't confuse us with the facts. I would also point out that the income and expenditure figures in this chart are for the Anvil and the Haymarket combined, not just the Anvil as stated, so that's wrong as well. I also notice a worrying development when it comes to the venue staff. Tucked away on page 30 is a statement that the transfer of these venues to a new management organisation could require a closure period of at least 6 months. No explanation is given why closure will be required. However, as with the closure of the Haymarket, I can see only one reason, and that's to avoid 2P, which no longer applies if a job has been made redundant for more than 6 months, which is exactly what happened to the Haymarket staff. I mean, we treated them very badly, and the Basingstoke Theatre Trust, and we now seem to be doing exactly the same, or proposing to do the same to the Anvil and the Anvil Trust. Many of us refused to support this whole commissioning process as we suspected it was just another excuse to privatise services. Given the way inconvenient facts have been ignored in this case, it looks like we were right. Unsurprisingly, I won't be supporting these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Andrew Finney. Sorry you had to wait so long, but it was the somehow the message you were going to be here and speak never got through. Communication is a wonderful thing. I ought to reset. I will reset this back to the 2 minutes if I can work out how to do it. There we go. And starting now.
Good evening, everybody. I will restrict my comments to the proposal before Cabinet tonight. But I would just say that we, along with others in the sector, do share concerns about the way in which commissioning has worked to date, and in particular, the accuracy of the figures in the reports. The previous speaker mentioned some comparisons. Where we would come from on that is that the comparisons need to compare like with like, and what is delivered in one venue is not what is delivered elsewhere. And the previous speaker mentioned about the lack of control in terms of Amble Arts as an organisation. Amble Arts is a registered charity. It's subject to, obviously, a board of trustees who have responsibilities, and it reports to the council its monthly management account figures, its attendance figures. It submits a business plan and it performs against KPIs, all of which are reported, and of course has, throughout its existence, had a member of the council on its board. My specific point tonight is that, yes, we've offered up or suggested that a good way of achieving savings and transitioning the Amble Trust into a broader funding stream we would say that ought to be over a period of years to give the trust time to adapt and develop and come through what has been a very difficult financial period. We've been through a recession, and without going into audience figures, that could well be why audience figures have been down. But to move to a commercial funding arrangement and look at other areas of potential investment takes time. We do have funding from the Arts Council and members, and have received a copy of the letter from the Arts Council. Their funding is worth nearly £900,000 over 3 years, but it requires a commitment from Basingstoke and Dean to continue to fund Amble Arts throughout that 3-year period. If that commitment isn't there, then there's a risk that Basingstoke would lose £900,000 worth of Arts Council funding. I would suggest that it would be in the interests of Basingstoke and Cabinet to amend the decision so that it is clear that the council will continue to fund Amble Arts throughout that 3-year period to secure and ring-fence that funding. During that same period, given what is proposed in terms of 5%, 5% and 7% reduction in actual funding, that's actual funding not taking into account inflation, you're talking of a compound saving of over 25% throughout that period. So that is the area where I would ask you to please reconsider. You've done it for Proteus because you're funding them to 2020. Please reconsider. It's in the best interests of Basingstoke and Dean. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Well, that concludes the list of speakers. Councillor, and just for the record, his name is Isaac, not Is it. Do you wish to respond, I think, please, on the various points?
Thank you, Leader. Right. If I can address the points as best I can made by each of the speakers in turn. I'll start with Councillor Harvey. I don't recognise a lot of what Councillor Harvey has to say, unfortunately, and he sort of his starting point is that we approach this in a sort of predetermined way and a dogmatic way. That's certainly not how I've approached it. All the officers, there was a genuine desire to work with those who voluntarily attended the commissioning outcome group, and we were very impressed with the ideas that they came forward with, and the feedback, as far as I am aware, from the attendees has generally been very supportive of the process. look, it was the first commissioning outcome group. I'm not saying that the thing is perfect, but I do think that compared to how this would have been handled in the past, we've actually involved those who are most actively involved in the arts and community work in Basingstoke, and surely there's benefits in that, and I think that's come through in some of the interesting proposals that we've had, recommendations from the COGS. What I find with Councillor Carvey is he's using a sort of language that seeks to paint me as a dogmatist who, and therefore he's really saying that he wants to block change, and I don't think that fair-minded people will be willing to accuse us of approaching it that way. As far as Councillor Potter's views are concerned, just reading my notes here. Yes, I think one does have to bear in mind, and this is a real point for Councillor Bierman as well, that this process has been concertinaed somewhat, because we had the CEP meeting only last week, I think, and therefore there hasn't been a lot of time to get papers through and to get decision notices through, but it has been a useful dialogue with CEP. I haven't approached it in a sort of grudging way, as was suggested. I've actually, it's been beneficial, and we've taken on board, I've sought to take on board some of the comments that that committee has made, and that comes through, I think, in the revised decision notice. As far as the internal team is concerned, that has been considered. It's not a case of it's not being they haven't been considered, but there are issues. If you wish to see Basingstoke Live grow, provide more activities and more types of entertainment, then there does come a question about the resourcing capabilities of a borough councillor, of a borough council to take this forward. We at the moment have 2.6 officers in terms of their time allocation working on events generally, and I think that our approach is, well, my approach certainly is that we shouldn't shut our eyes to at least asking the question about whether improvements can be made by having a dialogue with outside parties. There are also legal and financial limitations of trying to take this forward through the inward team, the in-house team. The point that Councillor Bierman made about sharing equipment is a good one, and that is in fact something that's been recommended by the officers and should be pursued. If I can now move on to Councillor Laura James, she makes reference to the issue of continuing to support the museums in and around Basingstoke when these are really Hampshire County Council's responsibility, and she puts that into the context of loss of core funding from Hampshire County Council on things like public transport and supporting people, which we're all very aware of. But I don't think it's helpful to make those sorts of linkages between Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. More to the point, I think, is that that the museums in Basingstoke play a very important role in the life of our community, and therefore on their own merit deserve to be supported. But we are looking at funding them for, I think, for another year, if my memory serves me correctly. So we are going to give ourselves time to make sure that we're happy with the new structure that Hampshire and Winchester City Council have put together in forming the Hampshire Cultural Trust. the soft market testing is going to be coming back to CEP, so I can confirm that. I suppose I was a bit surprised to hear Councillor James make reference to being supportive of the reduced funding for the AMBL, which does seem to be rather picking and choosing on what she favours in terms of where money should be going in terms of arts and culture in the community, and other areas where she.
I said I supported the chairman offering up 5%.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I didn't support it. It was the chairman that offered it up.
Right. Okay. Then if I can move on to Councillor.
Clarify on mic then for me, because I didn't say that. I didn't say it.
Can we just continue, please?
Yeah. But if I can then move on to Councillor Tilbury. He states that what we're proposing to do here is to hand over to a commercial operator. No decision has been made in that regard. He also says that the internal team were not considered, and their proposals were not considered. That's not the case. They were considered. He remarked about the fall in the attendance figures at the AMBL. One of the reasons we know about this now is because of the commissioning process and the research and the work that the officers have done. In the past, this wouldn't have been, potentially wouldn't have been brought into the light. That's why I think there is a case for doing soft market testing, which is what we're proposing. He also suggests this sort of sinister motive about TUPE, and again, I'm pleased to confirm that's not even been discussed and is not even a consideration. Finally, with the comments from former Councillor Finney. I share his concern that some of the comparative data was potentially not correct, and that needs to be addressed. I think, though, fundamentally we're talking about principles here in relation to what we're seeking to do with arts and culture, but point taken on that. I acknowledge that he's offered up savings over a period of years, and that the AMBL Arts needs time to make changes and also to seek out secure additional funding sources. He made reference to the Arts Council and the need for us to demonstrate a commitment for 3 years. I'll talk to him further about that, but where I have some difficulty here in this is that to date we have been providing year-on-year support for AMBL Arts, and so I think that the recommendation that we have in the paper for 2 years worth of funding is an advance.
Lots of points of clarification tonight, but why not? I don't see why you should be left out.
I acknowledge that throughout its existence, AMBL Arts has been subject to annual funding reviews, but that's merely been to set the budget and the agreed objectives for AMBL Arts for the forthcoming year. This paper actually potentially draws a line after 2 years and said in 2 years' time the funding could go elsewhere, that the management of the AMBL, which is the bit of AMBL Arts that's in question with Arts Council funding, because they don't fund anything at the Haymarket, that potentially that funding could be withdrawn after 2 years. If they enforce the letter of their agreement, which says they require Basingstoke and Dean to match fund for the 3 years. Doesn't state a level, it just says that they will support Anvil Arts through the same period. If they enforce that, then they could withdraw £900,000 worth of funding from Basingstoke. That's not really a risk that I would want to run. But the specific answer to your point is, yes, it's always been annual funding, but it's always been on the basis that there's an acknowledgement that Anvil Arts have a 20-year lease on the building and therefore they're going to be funded at some level. And that's the difference. So I'm not asking for a commitment to fund at a level. It's just the commitment to be there supporting in partnership with the Arts Council. Thank you. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I mean, I don't think we need to dwell on this too long. Any recommendation that goes forward that says, yes, please, let's throw away £900,000 coming into the borough would be a foolish step to take. And we need to make sure that we finesse the wording accordingly that gives the necessary comfort to the Arts Council without meaning that we tie ourselves for the long term in ways that we don't necessarily want to be tied. And I think that needs to maybe a little bit of work to be done on to make sure that we get that right. But I'm certain that would not be the intention of anybody. Do you have more words? Oh, you finished? Oh, he's finished. Right. In that case, we will throw it open to debate. Sorry, I couldn't. I thought you were just waving your finger at me, as usual. Right, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just? I have two things to say. First is I noticed that they said that about the COG. Now I've attended quite a number of these COGs, both the arts and the transport one, and if anyone there was not happy with the outcome or what had happened, or they wanted clarification, then the commissioning team asked them to come forward and to speak with them, have dialogue with them. And a lot of them did, and so they should. So the stakeholders have had, and they have listened to what they've had to say. And then on the COG and the supplementary briefing note to Cabinet, I have seen the work that the portfolio holder and committee has done on aiming to improve facilities across the borough. We're aiming to improve facilities. I understand the concerns of all stakeholders throughout this process, but I must stress that the revised decision notice is concerned with exploring all available options. There is no commitment to privatise Basingstoke Live, as suggested by some. What this decision notice is about is to undertake a soft marketing exercise, paying particular attention to the local talent. We know we have local talent, element of Basingstoke Live, to see if local events could be run better by an external body. The portfolio holder has been clear, and the outcome of this soft market testing will be referred back to the CEP committee. Only then, if a viable alternative exists, will consideration be made to commissioning these events through competitive tender. This administration is trying to drive forward the provision of all facilities in the borough, and we would be wrong, indeed irresponsible, to not explore all available options to maximise residents' value for money and the quality of events available. And I am working closely with Councillor Isaac and fully kept up to date as the portfolio holder. Part of my remit from partnership is with the arts and leisure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others? Anybody else? In which case it's only me. I've been a great supporter of Basingstoke Live over the years, and from when we first started it in 2007. I think probably because I spent my early formative working years working in the music industry, and therefore there's a certain sort of affiliation with it. I am, however, conscious that any events can never stay the same for long. They have an amazing ability to bore people rather quicker than you think they're going to if you keep them being exactly the same. There's an awful lot of good things that happen within Basingstoke Live that we need to cherish and to protect. But that is not the same thing as saying that it has to be done in exactly the same way as it's always been done. In fact, if you actually really look back at the history of Basingstoke Live, it has changed itself over the period. To say that one is going to go out and look at alternative means of provision is not to say that you are going to change those core values in it. And I think we do have a responsibility, as Councillor Mrs. Ostleton said, to all the council taxpayers who don't go to Basingstoke Live, to ensure that the money that we put into it is good value for money. And as well as all those who do go to it, and also should be getting good value for money when they get there. So I think that from that point of view, it is the right thing to do, to be soft testing. There is no guarantee what will come out of it. There may well not be anybody who could be an alternative source of providing it. We don't know at this stage, but at least we should have the information to find out whether there is or there isn't. And we cannot possibly at this stage say we must turn away from it on a point of principle when we don't know what it is that we're turning away from. That would be, I think, really would be not correct custodianship of taxpayers' money. On the, I think I made my views felt on the Anvil Arts situation. I do think we've got to make sure that we do protect it, and we will find a form of words to ensure that that money comes in. But I equally think that we do need, we've had the Anvil Arts virtually since the Anvil began, and it's not an inappropriate thing to be looking at exactly what they are providing and the way that things are provided. I am actually conscious that one of the first things I ever did when I came to this council was to sit on the, first of all, sit on the scrutiny committee that looked at the merger of the two, and I would dispute some of the points that were made about it wasn't, Haymarket wasn't bankrupt and other things. When I spent hours looking at the figures, there were definite serious problems there. But putting that to one side, I think that the results were always reported through the performance panel, and I'm surprised if that is not still the case. Certainly should be. And if not, I would like to know why the performance panel has stopped asking for it, because they should be looking at it. As far as the Hampshire Cultural Trust is concerned, and the point which Councillor James was making about why are we continuing to support the museums, and whilst we're seeing other areas being cut, strangely, that was exactly the point which I made to the Hampshire Cultural Trust when I saw them. And I do actually have maybe a slightly different view, in that I think Hampshire County Council cannot continue to expect us to take or to see other burdens being placed on us, whether it be from homelessness or transport or whatever, and yet still expect us to keep coughing up money for things that they want to do. And so that's why this very clearly says we'll pay for it for 1 year, but we will look at it during the course of the next year, see whether we wish to continue or not, and if so, at what level. So I think, and that by that time, other things will have become clear. I'm very pleased to see, however, that the Whitchurch Silk Mill gets in there, because I've really got quite a soft spot for the Whitchurch Silk Mill, and I rather like it. And I'm also very pleased that we have got the correct arrangement, I think, emerging for Proteus. I think Proteus has done some tremendous work. I think Proteus has the capacity to contribute an awful lot more to the cultural life of where we live, and I do hope that that this current arrangement put here is the start of something really good for the future. But overriding all of that, we have got to put into context the amount of money which we devote to arts and culture as part of our total expenditure across the borough. We are facing in the coming years significant constraints in our revenue incomes, which will put pressures on all sorts of parts of our budget. We cannot leave arts and culture to one side and say that they should not take some of the pain, but equally we should not allow ourselves, in looking to try and support other aspects of what we do, to find that arts and culture is undermined, because it is actually a vibrant arts and culture life that sustains the quality of life and the character and the nature of the community in which we live. And you always find when you've got a lot going on in the arts sector that it does reflect, I think, a very vibrant and society that people are happy to be part of, and that's what we want to have, is happy relationships. So, on the basis of that, we have a revised decision notice, which I've now scribbled all over. There's a couple of the revision you need to make, I think, Councillor, on the Anvil Arts, which we'll leave you to do after the after that. But other than that, are we happy to support the recommendations on the basis that actually what this is almost doing, a large chunk of this is agreeing to agree that we will come back to this issue once we have the more information as a result of the soft testing? Yep, agreed. Good. Please do.
Yes, I just wanted to reference another recommendation from the Community Environment and Partnerships Committee about establishing a fund for specialist talent with a desire and a programme to serve the community. I have to say that I think some further work that needs to be done on that in terms of the definition of it, and therefore what I would propose to do is to liaise with officers on that and then come back with some further recommendations on that.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, that I think concludes all the items which we have public speakers on. We will now, if somebody could tell Councillor Mrs. Reid that she can return, though she's going to have to go out again in a minute, but nevertheless, she can come in for a bit in case she feels lonely, assuming she hasn't gone home in the meanwhile. No, I think she should be out there. Oh, is she coming inside now? Oh, well, oh, well, could you ask her if she could come in and commune with us? Would you kindly stop communing with the public? Strange things. Right, we'll go back then to try and run through the rest of the items on the agenda, which means going back to item 6, the Council Plan 2013 to 2007 update. Deputy Leader?
Thank you, Leader. In the Council Plan 2013 to 2017, we, this administration and this council, set out that we would deliver good jobs, a high quality of life and a prosperous future for Basingstoke-on-Deane. This paper sets out that significant progress has been made to date. For example, building work has now started on delivering a Waitrose and John Lewis at home at Basing View. M3 Junction 6 works are underway. Regeneration in Oak Ridge is progressing and crime levels continue to decrease. This is a good start, and we've asked local people what they think about this. 96% of residents are now satisfied with their local area as a place to live, up from 87% in 2008. This is positive direction of travel, but there's further to go. 84% of residents say that they are now happy with the way that the council runs things. This is up from 58% in 2008. Again, this is a positive direction of travel, but there is further to go. And 70% of residents agree that the council delivers value for money, particularly important in light of the conversation we've just had. And this is up from 43% in 2008. Again, significant progress. But there is more to do. We recognise that there are some people who are not yet feeling the benefits of the work that the council has delivered. Indeed, they're not yet feeling the benefits of the uplift and prosperity that we are delivering for this borough. We have got a plan for Basingstoke-on-Deane. That is set out in the council papers. It remains our direction of travel, and this administration is working to secure a better future for our borough. I move that Cabinet notes this report as part of its budget setting process and its ongoing work to ensure that we are delivering good jobs, a high quality of life and a prosperous future.
Thank you very much. I think unless anybody wants to add anything to that, we will note that, and I'd just ask people to note that despite the urging of the Mayor, that I have actually no intention of following the Chief Executive's example and quitting while we're ahead. I think there's still a lot more that we can actually do for the future. Right, let's Wait till I see the mayor. Let's move on then to the medium-term financial forecast. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you. Or even the medium-term financial strategy.
Well, something like that.
Yeah. This is an updated report to 2018-19. It is a report that shows that we have a robust budget strategy for the next 4 years, and that our budget is in accordance with the council plan priorities. In order to pay for the services that our residents value over the medium term, we need to find additional savings and generate higher returns. The medium-term financial strategy addresses the challenges that we face currently of uncertain and volatile revenues, including business rates, new homes bonus, and the interest rates we obtain as a return on our monetary deposits. Key features of the report are that we're forecasting a surplus in 2015/16, but deficits in 2016-17 and 18-19, which will have to be addressed and are being addressed. We're looking to continue driving out cumulative further savings of 1.687 million over this period. I'm pleased because it bears directly on our residents' pockets that we're able to continue the freeze on council tax for a further year, but we're expecting, because of the pressures on our finances, to have to increase council tax 2% per annum thereafter. I'm also pleased that we are creating a new housing and homelessness reserve, which is an important priority for the administration, and the objective is that this will be funded up to £4.5 million. So to summarise, the council remains in a strong financial position. Our capital programme of £36.7 million is fully funded, and looking ahead to major regeneration and infrastructure projects we're planning, such as Manidown, we will need new capital and investment funding streams, which will have to be identified and earmarked. But I endorse this report to Cabinet.
Okay, this now we're being asked to approve this to go out for consultation. Obviously, things can change as a result of consultation, and it will be very interesting to see what comments come back along the way. And of course, as we move forward, things will change within the financial situation, so that there will no doubt be variations to what is set out there for the longer term. But I think holding council tax yet again, for which I think is the fifth year when this will be held, is something which is very clearly valued by council taxpayers, of which I'm one. That is very positive. I think addressing the housing needs with £4.5 million of further investment shows very clearly that we are concerned with those who are less fortunate within our community and whose specific needs do need to be addressed for the future. But it also contains some very interesting and I think innovative ways in which we are going to deal with what is undoubtedly, whichever colour of government we get in the next as a result of the next general election, is going to be a tough time for local authorities over the next 5 years. There's no way of escaping that, whoever finishes up being in power. And the one good thing is that we can say that our staff have been absolutely fantastic in helping us through the last 5 years of acute difficulty and financial difficulty in the economy, and real pressure on the borough, and I'm sure that they will do equally as well in the next 5. So, right, we're happy to note that then, well, to approve that to go out to consultation. Good. In which case, we move on to the next item, which is it's a report from me on supporting a business incubation hub here in Basingstoke. This went to committee, and I have to say was universally endorsed by the committee on all sides with glowing accolades as being exactly the sort of thing that we should be doing. For the record, what this does is it hopes to bring, particularly in the science field, they're not exclusively necessarily in the science field, people with very bright ideas for creating new businesses, with people with money to help those businesses be created, and acts, if you like, as a midwife to the whole process by mentoring and tutoring and helping the birth of these new businesses through using the expertise of other people who have already been down that particular route. It really is a wonderful way of doing it, and we're very lucky that we've actually managed to obtain the cooperation in this venture of Set Squared, who are the business incubation arm of 5 universities close to us. I try and remember what they are. I always tend to forget one, but it is Surrey, Southampton, Bristol, Bath, and Exeter. That's probably the first time I've ever got that right. And who have an absolutely fantastic track record for succeeding with business incubation. As an incubator, they are rated number 1 in Europe and number 2 in the world, the number 1 apparently being somewhere in Texas. So we are utilizing the services of people who really do know what they're doing, have a phenomenal track record of succeeding at what they do. It's what we're intending to set up here is totally in line with the objectives of the LEP. Is thoroughly and completely endorsed by the objectives of the LEP, and I expect as a result of that endorsement that we will see significant other funding streams coming in to support us in this project. I strongly recommend it to Cabinet going forward. Good. And I will stop waxing lyrical over that and pass back across to Councillor Isaac to talk about expanding church premises in Buckskin.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm very pleased to report that following an approach from Buckskin Evangelical Church, that we've agreed terms to sell a small piece of land owned by the council that joins the existing church. The church does a great deal of work, valuable work in the community, particularly those that were affected by recent flooding, but much wider than that. And by acquiring this site, they will be able to extend the community space and provide classrooms. We worked in conjunction with the ward councillors on this, so that's another positive. We've agreed a concessionary price to sell the land to the church, and so I hope that that this all goes forward quickly, and they can provide the classrooms they require in short order.
Good. Any comments? Otherwise, it's something we should just thoroughly endorse. Then we move on to item 11, which we say goodbye yet again, but for the final time, to Councillor Mrs. Reid. So I don't think you actually need to come back because there's nothing else on the agenda. Oh yes, I probably would do. Okay, well, we'll try not to be too long on this. Councillor Isaac, would you like to? It's still you. Yeah. This is the grant award scheme. Paper G.
Cabinet, I'm pleased to present this report, which is a radical overhaul of our grants award system that's been put together by the commissioning team. It ensures that grant funding by this council in future is aligned with council priorities, and that it's available to all voluntary community, environment, sports, arts and culture organisations. What this is going to do is provide a single platform for securing the council's support for grants, grant funding. It's, I believe, a fair and equitable application system and evaluation process that will now be in place, and that those organisations applying for grant funding will have a clear criteria to meet, and that will be much more understandable, transparent, than it has in the past, and will ensure that there's a quality of access. The new system will be outcomes focused, and there will be a clear performance management framework for us to make sure that the money that we're giving these groups is achieving the community benefits and value for money that we insist on for our residents. Broadly speaking, there are two types of grant. There's going to be grant-funded programs for specific programs, which will be available for 1 to 3 years and up to £20,000 per annum limit per program. And the second type of grant will be a strategic grant, which will involve a broader provision of activities by an organisation deemed to be strategic, of strategic value, and that will be those grants will be available for 1 to 5 years and above £20,000 per annum. So I think the new system can create getting better value for money and a more effective and efficient relationship with those who we grant fund.
Thank you very much. Good step forward. All happy with that? Good. In which case, the only thing that remains for me to do, apart from let Councillor Reid back into the room, is for the final time, and yet again, to say goodbye to the Chief Executive. Now, this is his final cabinet, and I am conscious that in the past he's knowing how much he really enjoys these events, he's been somewhat concerned about the occasional brevity with which some of these meetings have taken place. And so it really gives me enormous pleasure that this evening we've managed to give him absolutely full value for his time. So once again, Tony, thank you very much and goodbye.